Joining me is former Liberal Treasurer Peter Costello and former New South Wales Labor Treasurer Michael Costa. Peter, be kinder and gentler to Kevin Rudd, please.
As I'm standing in a pool of blood with bodies around me of people I've undermined, I'd just like everybody to be nice to me, please. There's some kind of disconnect, I think, in Kevin's mind. In his mind, if he engages in backstabbing and leaking and treachery, that's all justified. If anybody else does it, of course, they should be nicer and gentler. And I actually think this is a big part of Kevin's problem. There's this disconnect. He doesn't really see what effect his actions have on others. That's why he belittles people from public office. That's why his colleagues don't like him, and that's why I think he'll get found out eventually.
But Michael, he says it's changed.
Oh, look, I don't believe that. Look, I've got to declare my biases. I've dealt with him, so I'm in the category of the people that don't like him. Clearly, there's a lot of people that haven't dealt with him, and if you look at the polls at the moment, he's running hot. I've got to say that from a crude political perspective, it was probably the right decision. It's left the Labor Party in disarray, I think, internally. But, you know, that poll bounce, you can't argue with that, 6% on the primary. The real challenge, of course, is that Kevin hasn't changed. Kevin Rudd is a policy dilettante. Anybody that dealt with him knows that he's not interested in policy. He's interested in the campaigning, the adulation that comes with that. And in an election campaign, of course, that's important. But from a public policy point of view, from a governmental point of view, dysfunctionality, I think, is a possible outcome.
Well, I've been surprised how little is said on policy. It's like
he's not interested. He's not interested.
Thought about it for the 3 years. Can I just go quickly through the list and you tell me what you make of it? He's considering cutting the carbon price, considering reversing welfare cuts to single parents. He's considering giving he has given the Gonski education changes a new name. He's considering making it harder for boat people to get refugee status. He's not going to turn back the boats, and he's not going to back big budget cuts. Sum that up for us.
Doesn't this illustrate what the problem is? So he's been there for 3 years, right? He's been undermining Julia Gillard. He's been in at least 2 leadership ballots. There was another he didn't nominate in. And the one thing he's never given any thought to is what he wants to do. It's extraordinary. I just can't believe it. Now, Michael said, oh, it's probably the right decision because he was up in the polls. What does that tell you about the Labor Party? It's not about policy. It's not about principle. Any person who can show that they're up in the polls deserves the Labor leadership, no matter what their character is and no matter what they believe. I have to say to you, regardless of Kevin, this shows the utter bankruptcy of the Labor Party, that they would turn to a bloke they hate who has no policies.
Well, they don't all hate him. I mean, clearly there's out in the public...
Who likes him?
Well, you know, as I said to you, the people that have met him probably don't like him and have dealt with him. But the public...
If there's an MP that hasn't met him, they like him.
But the public out there, obviously, if you look at the polls, see something that I don't see and you don't see, and that's important in terms of an election. Look, just on the policy issue, as I said, he's a policy dilettante. The thing that surprised me, you know, we're heading for an $18 billion budget deficit. We've had debt go from when Peter left, I think it was negative.
No net debt. We had assets in the bank.
To what, 10% of net 10% of GDP, and he's talking about austerity. And this is even the word austerity. What he did last time was he conflated American and European politics with Australian politics. That's why we got that, you know, coterie of kindergarten Keynesians running around and, you know, goosing up the stimulus, where the only stimulus that counted for Australia was the Chinese stimulus, which was nearly $600 billion, if you remember, in 2009.
But Swanee said that was his greatest success.
Well, look, so that's the problem for Labor. This guy's good in opposition, and this is an oppositional campaign, given that Labor's coming from behind, but he's no good in government.
But come back to the boats for a moment. This is the man, right, that said that our government, the coalition government's boat policy was too tough, which had got boat arrivals down to about 130, I think, in the last year. We're now having more than a boat a day. In fact, the press have given up reporting that we're having...
3 boats arrived in 24 hours after...
Given up reporting. There are so many who've lost all control over boat policy. He's been in the caucus meeting. The members from Western Sydney have said, Kevin, they've said, Julia, this is a problem, right? He used it to undermine Julia. He gets there, and what's his proposal?
To do nothing.
To do nothing. And then we go out and we have this... hang on, his proposal...
I won't lurch to the right, and I won't lurch to the left, and I won't stop the boats. What will he do?
Now, here's his proposal. He says, I'll let them keep coming because otherwise we might go to war with Indonesia.
Yeah.
Now, that was his proposal. Now, I've got to say to you, anybody else, any other Prime Minister who got up and said, well, you know, my opponent is threatening a war with our nearest neighbour, you'd be run out of town for saying something like that. What do you think Udiono's sitting up there thinking at the moment?
Well,
what would you be thinking?
Well, is he supposed to prepare for war? Is that what he's saying?
Well, you better arm your ships because if Abbott gets elected, bang!
But again, this is a case of Kevin not interested in policy, got no understanding, just shooting from the lip because it sounded good at the time. The real challenge, and I think let's get this back into context, we're talking about an election campaign. He is a good election performer.
But do you think... I want to pick you up on that. I mean, you say he's a good election performer because he did well in the 2007 election, OK?
And he's doing well in the polls.
There was a reason why we're losing the 2007 election. We've been a long time, you know, and, you know, we had all sorts of problems ourselves. He won that. 2010, was he very good in the 2010 election?
Well, we all know what he did.
But Michael, can I pick up on something? One of his big problems is a loss of talent. I mean, whether you like them or not, you know, he's lost Wayne Swan, Stephen Conrad, Craig Emerson, Peter Garrett, Joe Ludwig, Greg Combay, some of them in charge of key policies for the election. Is that going to destabilise him?
Well, let me put my biases again on the table. Losing Wayne Swan is a plus for anybody.
Yeah, I agree with that. That will help.
But Greg Combay... you know, I had my differences with Greg, but Greg was a talent for the Labor Party, and seeing somebody like that go is a major blow for the Labor Party. There's no question at all about that. However, this will be a presidential election campaign. It'll be Kevin Rudd, Tony Abbott, and that's how it's going to be framed. And it won't be about policy. It'll be about personality.
He's also lost, I think, some of the punch of one of his ministers, Bill Shorten, who comes out of this looking very bad, I think, and his credibility wrecked. Have a listen to Bill Shorten.
I continue to support our Prime Minister, full stop. I continue to support our Prime Minister,
Will you
full
guarantee
stop.
that support until the next election?
I will continue to support our Prime Minister, yes.
And he didn't.
Look, I'm disappointed with Bill. I think last week on your program I was hoping he'd be an alternate so he wouldn't have to face the Rudd challenge. But the bottom line here is Bill Shorten made a choice. He made a choice of either being a Bob Hawke or a Graham Richardson. He chose Graham Richardson, and I think that's the end of his leadership aspirations and ability forever.
I'll speak up in favour of Bill Shorten here because the one thing we've learned is it's in the Labor Party, it doesn't matter how badly behaved you are, it's never the end of your leadership. No. Look at Kevin. Kevin sabotaged the 2000 election, he can come back. Bill would think to himself, well, OK, I sabotaged Gillard, I sabotaged Rudd. I'm in there, I'm in a long Labor tradition here. I've proved that I can make and dispatch leaders. I don't think Bill would think that he's gone by any means. The thing about Bill is, I'd say again, I mean, these people are policy light. You know, what are Bill's policies? I was waiting for somebody to stand up and say, look, I've switched my vote from Julia to Kevin because this policy can work on the boats, or this policy can clean up the NBN, or this policy can balance the budget, or this can be done with the 457 visas, or this is my vision for the future of Australia.
But the problem, guys, look, you're absolutely right. Absolutely nothing to do with policy, all about votes. Peter Costello, Michael Costa, thank you so much for joining me.